Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll begin with an invocation led by Councilmember Singh, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Roberto. Please rise as you're able. We're starting. Go ahead, Councilmember Singh.
Good evening. I'm sharing from a reading by Reverend Joseph Cherry. This is a prayer for living intention. If we have any hope of transforming the world, we must be bold enough to move into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves. May we be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, would you please call roll?
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman Helsley.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Here.
Councilwoman Parker. Here. Councilwoman Ryder.
Here.
Councilman Roberto.
here.
Councilwoman Singh. Here. Vice Mayor Smith. Here. And Councilman Thomas. All members present, Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion on the minutes from our last meeting? Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any items to be withdrawn from tonight's agenda? Are there any items requested to be postponed?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move to postpone 12A to the next council meeting, partly because some issues of weather and illness have arisen with some of the interested parties, but also because I believe more discussion would be beneficial before we proceed on this one, and there's no opposition to this motion.
Okay, item 12A has been proposed, the motion's been made to postpone that for 2 weeks. It's been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, all those in favor of this postponement, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion to postpone carries. Any other items to be postponed? Okay. Are there any items requested to be added by motion? There are no consent agenda items. Okay. All right, we'll move on to my mayor's report. As we all know, since we have been out and about and got here tonight, tonight is expected to be one of the coldest nights of the year, and this cold blast is expected to last throughout the week. The warming centers across the city are in need of more volunteers and food donations, particularly at the Salvation Army site on Broadway. Aaron Reed with the Joint Office of Housing Stability has been sending out regular updates, which we've been sharing on the city's Facebook page and on our website. I want to thank everybody who's been lending a hand, and also just note that this is the second winter that we've had this new critical service, and everyone's hard work is very much appreciated. Tomorrow, our Public Service Department is holding a direct hire event at the Public Works Building from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. We are looking to hire 20 entry-level positions, and the starting pay is $18 an hour, and that includes a highly competitive benefits package. This special hiring event is designed so applicants can fill out an application, get interviewed, go through a background check, and get the required health screening all in one day, hopefully ending with a conditional job offer. To learn more or fill out an application ahead of time, go to knoxvilletn.gov/jobs. Again, this direct hire event begins tomorrow at 8 a.m., and I want to thank Rachel Butzler and HR and the communications team for getting the word out so effectively. We anticipate a lot of interest, and being able to expedite that hiring, I think, will really help a lot as well. Rules of decorum. Quick reminder, those who wish to speak either to a specific agenda item or during public forum should sign up with the city recorder before 4 p.m. Please do not use profanity, and when speaking to specific agenda items, please remember to stay on topic. Robert's Rules of Order state that remarks must be germane to the question ahead of the assembly. That is, statements must have bearing on whether the pending motion should be adopted. Those who fail to adhere to these rules may be ruled out of order and asked to step away from the podium. For those who are listening, Please note that you may not disrupt a public meeting from the audience. Those who do may be asked to leave. Thanks in advance for everyone's respect for these rules. And that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any reports of council members or committees? Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to give a quick update. As many of you know, we had our inaugural meeting of the task force that we established 2 weeks ago to look at rules of our rules of procedure and perhaps creating a charter review process. We met at 3:30 today and just wanted to tell council members that you can expect Mr. Johnson to be sending you a list of our council rules. And I'm asking those of you in particular that are not on the committee to take a look at those. And if there are specific rules that you would like us to think about changing, or you have concerns about those, send those to Mr. Johnson, because what we're going to do this first month, we meet again on February 18th at 3:30. We will be looking at those ourselves. The former vice mayors will be talking to former council members to get their input on our council rules. I think it's really important to understand why some of the rules are in place. If we have questions about them, the rules are usually made because somebody thought they were a good idea. And so we're going to talk about, do they still work for us? But they'll talk to council members, former council members, reach out to Will with rules that you would like for us to take a look at. In February, we will compile all those and begin our discussion of what we as a committee think about them. We also are fortunate enough to be able to rely on MTAS and the Civic Institute at the Baker Center, who will be available to do research for us on best practices within other jurisdictions inside the state of Tennessee and out, and some best practices. So I think we've got a lot of good tools at our fingertips, but we have lots of rules. Many of them we don't necessarily need to change, or nobody thinks they need to change. So we'd like your ideas of where you want us to begin, which ones you really want us to take a look at. And that's where we'll start, and I'll give you a report. We will have met right before this meeting again on February 18th, and I can update you then. But when you get something from Will, I wanted you to understand why. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other council member lights on, we'll go on to item 8.
8A is a resolution confirming the reappointment of Jared Sprecher and appointments of Kristen Combs and Anna Hallowell Gianfrante to the City of Knoxville Public Arts Committee.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9A is an ordinance approving the request of Knoxville Habitat for Humanity for an amendment to the East City Sector Plan from civic and institutional to medium-density residential for property located at 4325 Pinehurst Drive, 4th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9B is an ordinance approving the request of Knoxville Habitat for Humanity for a one-year plan amendment from civic and institutional to medium-density residential for property located at 4325 Pinehurst Drive, 4th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Wright.
I'll just make a motion to consolidate the next agenda item with this one as they're on the same property.
Okay, motion to consolidate item 9B and C, correct? It's been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion on the motion to consolidate? Seeing none, all those in favor of this consolidation, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion, is there a motion to approve the consolidated thing? Or do we, I don't know if we have to.
I think I made a motion to approve it first, so.
Okay, that's fine. Will says that's fine.
Johnson just needs, do you need to
Okay.
vote on
So we're voting on a motion to approve items 9, B, and C. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9D is an ordinance to change the base zone and classification of property located at 5941 Kingston Pike from CG3 to CG1, White Realty and Service Corporation applicant to Second District.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11A is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with WSP USA Incorporated in an annual amounts not to exceed $55,000 to provide staff augmentation services for the city's Transportation Engineering Division.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11B is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Gresham Smith in an annual amounts not to exceed $55,000 to provide staff augmentation services for the city's Transportation Engineering Division.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11C is a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend the contract with Design and Construction Services Incorporated for the Cal Johnson Recreation Center Improvements Project, increasing the contract amount by $83,858.40 for a new total contract amount of $462,208.40, and extending the date of completion to February 14, 2025.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11D is a resolution approving the selection of the accounting firm Maudlin and Jenkins LLC to provide audit services to the Knoxville Utilities Board, beginning with audits to be performed in 2025 as required by the legislative act creating the Knoxville Utilities Board.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11E is a resolution setting the in lieu of tax payments for the electric, gas, and fiber systems of the Knoxville Utilities Board for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024, and providing for the allocation and distribution of such payments to the affected taxing jurisdictions.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11F is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for and accept a grant award of up to $1,750,000 with no required local match from the Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council for substance abuse advocacy and prevention and for combating overdose deaths.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Council members, we have 3 people signed up to speak in opposition to this item. First is Elizabeth Rowland. Ms. Rowland, if you could come to the podium, turn the microphone on, and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rowland, resident of Fountain City 37918. I'm here as a member of Knoxville Heart to speak against agenda item 11F for 3 reasons. 1, its lack of clarity as to what it would fund. 2, that it would preempt the work of the Alternative Response Task Force. And 3, that it would address the public health emergency of drug addiction and overdoses with a criminal justice approach rather than a public health approach. First, I want to lay out our understanding of what this grant request would be asking for, since that is quite unclear from the materials provided in the agenda packet. The resolution says that the Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council is requesting proposals for community grants to implement the opioid abatement remediation strategies. It also says grant funds received would be used to support KPD's, quote, efforts in the fight against the opioid epidemic. The grant would be up to $1.75 million and requires no local match. In the grant routing form provided in the packet, it says the life of the grant would be January 2026 through December 2028, so 3 years. Practically, the only other information provided in the grant routing form is in response to a sub-question related to matching funds, of which there are none, which makes it kind of confusing. Question 12 says, will any new positions be created by the match? And the answer is no. But below, a sub-question asks, if so, how are these positions to be funded beyond the life of the grant? The response says, quote, 1 drug diversion advocate position KPD will look for additional grant funding sources after 2028, end quote. Reading these slim details, we know almost nothing about what the $1.75 million would go towards, aside from one drug diversion advocate position over 3 years. That seems like one very expensive drug advocate position. Upon further inquiry, Councilmember Parker shared with us that Chief Noel had emailed her saying that the grant proposal would not only include one drug diversion advocate position, but it would also add 3 additional co-response teams for 2026, 27, 28 by hiring 3 behavioral health clinicians through the McNabb Center, one of which would have a supervisory role. It would also include, according to Chief Noel, the purchase of 3 vehicles for the 3 new CRT teams or co-response teams, as well as other travel expenses, training, and purchase of office supplies. Chief Noel also clarified in this email that the drug diversion advocate would work in conjunction with the co-response teams to conduct follow-ups with individuals and their families who are affected by the opioid crisis. The entry-level salary would be $45,000 annually. So even though the resolution and the grant routing form don't mention co-response at all, according to Chief Noel, this grant proposal is a request to expand the co-response program. As you know, item 11H on this agenda is also about continuing and expanding the co-response program, though it's unclear how these 2 items relate to each other. So Hart would like to ask, are the 3 additional clinicians that this grant would apparently fund be in addition to the 2 additional clinicians that Helen Ross McNabb wants to hire under 11H? Aside from the lack of clarity around what this grant would actually go toward, Hart asked council to vote no on 11F for 2 other reasons. First, expansion of co-response at this time would preempt the work already underway by the Alternative Response Task Force. In January of last year, City Council held a public hearing, after which the majority of council members expressed support for formulating a task force to explore establishing an alternative response team here in Knoxville. And in February of 2024, Mayor Kincannon formally asked the United Way to facilitate this task force, and it had its first meeting less than 2 weeks ago. There is much work yet to be done, so please let the Alternative Response Task Force carry out its mandate to research and develop a business and strategic plan for alternative response in Knoxville before preempting it by allocating more funds, grant or otherwise, to the co-response team expansion. Second, housing a drug diversion advocate within KPD perpetuates the practice of treating drug addiction as a criminal justice issue rather than a public health issue. Folks addicted to illegal drugs tend to be afraid of the police because they don't want to get arrested. It's quite logical. So providing drug diversion services through the police puts individuals in a very uncomfortable, sometimes untenable position in order to get the care and services that they need. What is needed is a way to access services that doesn't trigger fear.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland.
Okay.
That concludes your time.
Thank you.
Next person signed up to speak on opposition to item 11F is Constance Every. Is Ms. Every present?
You know I am. Stop playing.
You have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Yes, Constance Every, 37914, Knoxville, Tennessee. Elizabeth, you dropped Mike. I really don't have much to back you up with other than the facts, right? So I totally agree with Elizabeth. This is just more money been asked by Knoxville Police Department. Didn't we just give y'all $27 million like a couple weeks ago? Right. So the point is that we know for a fact that police, as already been highlighted, been involved with any type of drug coalition or drug funding or drug rehabilitation program is definitely a form of criminalization off rip. That's the first thing we're going to think and the first thing we're going to feel. More importantly, we know that the co-responder program, which is, again, F, G, and H all tied together, has not shown real success. I look at this, India announced off rip about the women's shelters needing resources. So this goes back to what we talked about a week ago or so. We could be using this money to support those initiatives instead, especially since we know the city does not give a single dime to the warming centers. Not a single penny goes to the warming centers. So this is somewhere where this money could be redirected. More importantly, you're talking about again, bringing in an oversight that's supposed to be working with already the heart organizations, Helen Ross McNabb, and I believe we have the Drug Coalition also here tonight. So I'm trying to figure out, why is KPD needing this money when we got organizations really already set up, designed to do this particular work? As Elizabeth's already highlighted, this is throwing the cart before the horse initiative, because a lot of things are still need to be researched and studied and developed, and yet you already got money coming in, and most of that money is going straight into KPD's hands, which again is not clear on what they're going to use it for, how they're going to use it for, and how it's actually going to be administered for the real so-called initiative that you're asking this money for, which is to assist in our drug opioid usage and other developments of treatment, because it literally says abuse advocacy and prevention. I would like an elaboration on what do you exactly mean by that in this particular agenda of your so-called programming and request for this particular type of money. I think the real concern is that, as always, you see KPD bragging about de-escalation of situations. We hear bragging about mental health, CTI training, and yet in real-time application, there has been a autonomous understanding of failure. I still go back to Anthony Thompson Jr., still wondering where was de-escalation training in that particular approach. I think about Robert Bailey. This is something that actually could assist him. Where was de-escalation approach in that? Sister Alicia Batts, which is David Batts' sister, is here tonight. I'm sure she would like to know where are some of these trainings that are being presented and why her brother's death was not preventable in either altercation with KPD or Knox County Sheriff. So I feel like we're just still coming to the mic, saying the same things over and under again. And yet you all are going to do what you always do. You're going to vote yes without having real facts and details. Amelia will be the most rationalized, reasonable voice of the council to also reiterate what we're saying at this podium. India's probably going to be rude, ugly, dismissive, just totally unethical in her behavior as the chairman. Talk about Robert's Rule of Order. Maybe you should look at what the chairman's job is. It's definitely not debating fellow council members on this body. That's definitely not what Robert's Rule of Order says to do for you either. And more importantly, Paul Noel, you need to be clarified on your so-called department's initiatives and vision. 1 minute you want to surveillance us with drones with flash bomb capability, which is a military style of equipment. The next minute you swear you're the friend of the community and want to support us and help us with things of issues such as drug addiction. I really don't know where Knoxville's going these days. I mean, I feel like we're trapped on this unending hamster wheel of foolishness and, more importantly, lack of real competent leadership. You know, I don't have much else to add. Like I said, Elizabeth hit a lot of things right on the head. This is a lot of money that can go to a lot of other things. Like I said, youth enrichment, warming shelters, housing and development, affordable housing development, not $1,400 apartments for one person. That's not affordable housing and no definition. I think about transportation. You failed there, India. You killed the bus lines. You got elderly people still not able to transport to medical appointments and doctor appointments every day. 1,001 reasons that this money could go to besides Knoxville Police Department, who has yet to show a real, credible direction of change in the department and improvement that would really say they're trustworthy to our community. And I yield my time.
Council members, the next and final person signed up to speak on this item is Rick Roach. Mr. Roach? Okay, moving on. Council member Singh.
I thought that we had more speakers. So Elizabeth Rowland did a great job of asking a lot of the questions and expressing the concerns that I have as well. So Chief Noel, could you answer some of those? I can re-ask, but if you could get started with what this money is for, getting specific. Is that true about the co-responder? And go ahead.
So our ask for this grant is to hire through 2026, 2027, and 2028, 3 master-level clinicians from Helen Ross McNabb to expand our co-responder program. It'll also fund a drug diversion advocate position that will work in conjunction with our co-responders team. They'll conduct follow-ups on individuals and their families who are affected by the opioid crisis. They'll also purchase 3 vehicles for our co-response team, travel expenses for the National Co-Response Conference, drug recognition training, and office supplies and publication expenses for the drug diversion advocate position.
Do you know with the co-responder team right now, how many calls are opioid related?
Offhand, I do not.
Because I was thinking that that's usually first responder and the police come and the fire department and ambulance. That's usually the drug overdose calls?
We are called routinely on overdose calls. We are called routinely on people that are in some sort of crisis, whether it's from drug addiction, from chronic homelessness, from chronic mental illness, or a combination of all of those. We go on those calls on a regular basis. So we have regular Knoxville police officers that respond on those calls. We have our crisis intervention team, trained officers, CIT, and then, now we have 4 co-responders as well that go on those calls.
It doesn't feel good to be voting today on expanding the co-responder model, which I do support, but then also to have this going on underneath and it wasn't included in our agenda package. That feels really uncomfortable to me.
This is a grant that we're applying for that would take effect into 2026. So we have to apply for the grant now to compete for that grant and to possibly be awarded the grant in 2026.
Okay, thank you. This is an issue that's very, very near and dear to my heart. I am very uncomfortable with the idea that this money is going to KPD. I think it needs to go into direct services. And we have Webster Bailey here from MDC. Webster, if you'd like to come up and say what some direct services are in need of right now.
You just turned it off. There you go. Back on.
Definitely not experienced.
That's okay.
Webster Bailey, Metro Drug Coalition. From a prevention standpoint, is that what you're asking?
Sure, that's what the funds are going for.
I mean, I can tell you the type of prevention work that the Metro Drug Coalition is engaged in, which is primarily, we do a lot of harm reduction work. We do a lot of work actually in combination with the KPD, AMR, Knoxville Fire Department as well. So we do some harm reduction work there, which is really around overdose reversal work, and then how to work with those individuals and families to connect them with care, at the right place, the right time, and the right way. And then the other type of prevention work that we do is in our school system primarily. We work with after-school programs. We work on UT campus, community college campus.
Sorry, can you tell me about the positions that are going to be losing funding at the Gateway?
So later this year, the Gateway Recovery Community Center, for those of you who don't know, is a local recovery community center here in downtown Knoxville area. And 4 or 5 of our positions to help us launch that initiative we will be losing funding later this year. We've got funding for those individuals through the end of September. Through a couple of different funding mechanisms, primarily through the state, the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And so we're looking for funding. What will we do come October 1 to fund those 4 or 5
I'm going to grab the last few minutes
positions?
because I only have 30 seconds.
Yeah, take it.
Okay. I am always saying that the police department should not be social workers. And to me, this is kind of what this money should be going to direct services, and it doesn't feel like the police department is the best place for that kind of thing to happen.
If I could respond to that, I don't think we want to be social workers either, but we respond to these calls every single day, regardless of whether we have a co-responder team or not. So having the appropriately trained personnel is something that really helps us be able to do our job effectively.
Councilmember Singh, I just would add that nothing in our application, nothing in this grant application precludes Metro Drug Coalition or Knox County Health Department or other social service providers from applying to this grant or others. And so we definitely want to support the social service side of things, but our job with KPD is the law enforcement side, and this allows us to do that hybrid approach that has worked. So just wanted to mention that, and I don't know if Metro Drug Coalition is applying or has applied for this state opioid settlement dollars. You should come to the podium if you wanted to add that point of information.
Thank you, Mayor. For Metro Drug Coalition, we did apply and received a small amount of funding from the Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council this past funding cycle. Because we received it, we were not eligible to apply this funding cycle that was applications were due just a month or so ago. So we're having to wait, and we will reapply for more funds from the Opioid Abatement Council at the state level.
And I believe we, through our city settlement dollars, sent some funds in addition to the community agency grants to the Metro Drug Coalition.
Yes, ma'am,
Yeah,
$60,000.
60,000 on top of the amount we normally spend. So it's, just wanted to mention that. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is a really good example of why I do look forward to us reviewing our rules, because what people are responding to is that under Robert's Rules of Order, if you enter the debate, it's good to relinquish the chair so that it's a fair debate, but our rules aren't clear on that because it gives the privilege of the floor to the mayor. So I hope that we have a conversation about that, because otherwise, the person chairing our meeting is able to dominate the discussion a little bit too much and not allow space for council members, for this to be a conversation among council members that's then informed by the mayor and the administration. So I just wanted to clear up that piece of it. I have a lot of questions. I agree with what the speakers have said and with my colleagues' concerns. But before I launch into my questions, one thing that I wanted to reiterate that's already been lifted up by the speakers is the timeline that we're on in terms of looking into alternative response. And the reason why I wanted to bring forward a resolution to get support from council on alternative response that included that timeline is because I was worried about the scenario that we see in front of us, where a process that's really important to the community has not been given the time and attention and urgency that it deserves. And so here we are a year later after having first reviewed a proposal for an alternative response team in February of last year, and that task force has only met once. So that's very unfortunate and disappointing. This is really important work that community members are anxiously waiting for the city to follow through on. And it is something that we would, even if we do not have a fully fleshed out team, we should have processes in place that are supporting that task force that we've all committed to. And that can be done through the co-response team. I'll talk about this more when we talk specifically about the contract. But just looking at this grant funding, applying the grant funding to the co-response team without having any sort of discussion about the work of the co-response team since 2021, not having any sort of written report so we can look at the numbers, understand the call data. All of this information has to also inform the task force. So to not have the call data for co-response is not only unfortunate when we're considering this grant application, but it's unfortunate for the work that we're supposed to be committed to when it comes to alternative response. So regardless of what happens tonight, my hope is that this co-response program will begin to share the data with that alternative response process so we can begin to analyze that information. Now, in terms of this, I really have a lot more questions about the contract than I do about the grant. But what I'll lift up is I looked into this grant to see what could be funded under this grant. Alternative response is one of the programs that is listed, and a myriad of other things that this grant could go towards. I am in agreement that when we focus these dollars within KPD, we are criminalizing this issue. And it's not enough to say, well, KPD is answering these calls. What I want to hear is an acknowledgement that we have requested an alternative process and an update on what you all are doing so that we do have the capacity to redirect these calls to the appropriate person and they're not all going through KPD. So these are the conversations I feel like we should be having, and we're not. And so that's why I'm not in support of this grant proposal.
Councilmember Singh.
Thank you. It's funny to me that there are a couple different items in a row that I don't understand how the logic is. One of the things was KUB, which I need to sit down with them and talk about this, but they're charging recovery homes and transitional housing commercial rates. That's a place where this money could go to. That's a direct service. This money comes out of a lot of suffering. The city gets about $700,000 to distribute for the communities that are doing this work. And then this is 1.7 million, more than $1 million. So that's my concern, that we're just not focusing it on where the real issue is. And the police department does not seem like a place for prevention work. Thank you.
Councilmember Ryder?
Yeah, so Chief Noel, quick question for you, and then I believe I have a question for Leanne from Helen Ross McNabb, because Councilwoman Singh had a question that I think was for them, and it didn't get answered, so. Chief Noel, I have no idea if I called you council member a minute ago, sorry. Chief Noel, is there any more, so when I look at the packet on this agenda item, it's basically the grant routing form, but we don't actually have, is there more to the packet for what you guys applied to for the grant? So we just have like an in-house routing form in the packet.
There may be, I'd have to check with the grants team to see if there's anything else.
So when I look at, so I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna be that bitchy Karen here for just a second. If it's a concern about our rules and how things function here, that certain people shouldn't dominate the conversation, and that it's a concern, what I heard Councilwoman Parker say is that we should be able to have a discussion. Is that what I heard you say, Councilwoman Parker? You said we should be able to have a fair discussion.
I'm not as sensitive as others. I mean,
I don't like being yelled at, and it makes it hard to hear. Maybe it's because I'm older and I'm harder of hearing than you are, but I can't hear with the heckling, and it's really not fun.
Hey, members of the audience, you're not allowed to interrupt the council member's discussion. If you persist, you'll be asked to leave.
So Chief Noel and Boyce, when I look at the website for the opioid thing, I believe the due date for this grant is in March. That's what their website says. Mr. Evans, the due date appears to be March to turn in for the grant.
I believe that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
But they got to go through the determining who's going to get awarded and so forth. So as Chief Noel said, we won't know till 2026 or
Okay,
so.
but in terms of us voting on tonight, it's due to them by March, and tonight is January. Leanne, I apologize for calling on you by first name. The question that Councilmember Singh brought up was, how many of the co-responder calls are opioid? Like, what is the breakdown? How does it shake out?
Please turn your microphone on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you. Leanne Human-Hilliard, 200 Tech Center Boulevard, 37912, Knoxville. To answer your question, we do track data that we put in our own app through the McNabb Center when we respond to calls. We do not do diagnostics, including the presence of a co-occurring disorder within that app. We can go back and pull it from people we've served, but we do not track that specific piece of demographic or diagnostic pieces. I don't know the answer to tell you how many.
Okay. I don't see any other. Okay. So what can you tell us about the data? Since the funding for this grant is being asked to go with the co-responder program, how does it apply to the opioid funding?
So, the request from us for KPD was to expand our co-response program from 4 to 6, and I think that's
I think she's talking about item
She
F.
is, yes.
Okay.
So-
I am.
So
Yeah.
in response to that, it is a future state, if, my understanding would be, and I don't want to speak for KPD, but it would be a future state if we were to expand co-response further from the 6.
Okay. I would like to suggest making a motion to postpone this to the next meeting to get more information about the grant proposal. It's
Okay,
not-
motion's been made to postpone this item for 2 weeks
And seconded.
and seconded.
I have a lot more questions, and I'd like to see a lot more information from Helen Ross McNabb on the calls that are specific to opioid and tie it to this grant. But I also think it's important, and we clearly have a lot of issues related to opioid abuse, and East Tennessee has the highest incidence of any other part of the state. So it is very reasonable for entities from East Knoxville, or from Tennessee and Knoxville specifically, to be getting money from the opioid settlement. So, anyway.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, this item's postponed for 2 weeks. Next item, 11G.
11G is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for and accept an Appalachia High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant in the amount of $115,500 with no required matching funds from the U.S. Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration as part of the multi-jurisdictional law enforcement agency efforts in combating narcotics crimes to be used to fund officer overtime pay.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. First person signed up to speak in opposition to this is Constance Every. Miss Every?
See, this is what I call the elephant of the room. Because if you read the first item, they wanted to help people with drug addiction. Now you get to the second item, oh no, we want to criminalize people with drug addiction. This is the real. This is the real right here. So, as we said before, now we have finally gotten Councilwoman Ryder. It's rare. I'm actually going to agree with you. You did the right thing tonight because that was the appropriate thing to do, given the fact you all are so unprepared. No data, no information, not even Helen Ross McNabb can save you. Literally came in here thinking you was going to get $1.7 million and then turn around the next agenda item, ask for a few $100,000 more to actually do what you were going to do, which was criminalize these people. See, you was going to use the first one to bring them in, and then you're going to arrest them, and then you're going to charge them, and then you're going to take it through the whole process of criminalization in the good faith of helping people. This is the irony of Knoxville. This is the part I love. I love when y'all do it like this because it really shows your hand. The other part I wanted to add to this was that I thought we had a drug court already set up. Don't we have a drug court or something like that supposed to be already kind of doing something similar? Yeah. County. But still, it's a process, right? Because they make the charges and then it still goes to the county at some point and go through the drug court, right? So I just think this is just irony in its face at this point because I'm trying to figure out, first off, why is DEA in Knoxville? What type of drug dealing issues are we dealing with here? I mean, I know people use drugs and things like that, but do we have it to the level that we need the DEA in our city and our state? I know they got Drano set up, right, with the the Michigan folks and all those type of things going with the intersectionality. But that's a state level thing. So I'm trying to figure out what local purpose do we have for this? Like, really, what's your real initiative here? I mean, I just want y'all to really pay attention to how they move right here. Like, this is exactly the agenda. Exactly, agenda. So you were never in the business of helping anyone. You were in the business of trying to help your stats for your department look like you're solving gun crime by arresting people that do or deal drugs, correct? Correct. So therefore, that's why this is important that we unpackage what they're doing, why they want this money, and more importantly, as has already been highlighted, the purposing, the real purpose for these type of initiatives. Because we already acknowledge the fact that you all don't belong in preventive care. You all don't belong in partnerships with other organizations that do preventive care. You all should not be getting money to organizations that should be getting the money as our middleman. See, that's a middleman type thing. So you don't even belong in the chain of funding in general. So the only thing that makes sense tonight on this agenda for y'all to get some money for is G. G is the only one that actually makes sense because even H don't make no sense. But G does because that's what the police really do, right? Y'all chase drug dealers and drug users around the city and the state and the country, right? That's what y'all really actually do. Y'all looking for El Chapos in Knoxville, right? That's what we got going on down here, correct? Okay, I'm just trying to make sure. So like I said, Knoxville, look at what they do. Look at how they spend the money. Look at the narrative that they try to sell to us for their purposing of so-called funding, when the truth is written on the wall right in your face in black and white. There it is. That's what they wanted the money for. They want 1.7 million, another 115,000 to go with it so they can really criminalize people is what they really wanted to do. This is not about helping folks at all. This is about making the department look like they're cracking down on drug crime. That's what it's really about. And I yield my time.
The next person signed up to speak in opposition to this item is Rick Roach. Mr. Roach, is he present? Okay, that concludes the people who signed up to speak to item 11G. Chief Noel, is this a grant that we have applied for and received routinely for drug crime?
That's correct.
Council, Vice Mayor Smith? Okay. Councilmember Ryder?
I think Councilwoman Parker had her light on. I'll defer to her.
Okay, Councilmember Parker?
Thank you. I just wanted to explain a little bit more about the grant. The grant goes towards overtime pay for KPD officers. It does, if we vote this up or down, it doesn't impact the work taking place. It just reimburses the city for money that's already been spent. So it's essentially turning down free money for work that they're already going to do. So that's why I approve it every year.
Councilmember Ryder?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to support this, and Councilwoman Parker summarized some of that, but the thing is pretty clear here. This is for the overtime funding for multi-jurisdictional law enforcement agency. I just want to make that clear because I'm not sure some of the comments adequately describe what exactly we are voting for.
Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. So just want to be clear that up or down, this is to say that we are in favor of them applying for the grant, and if they are approved, they can receive the funds. It does not mean that they have already been awarded the funds.
Correct.
Okay. And also on this one, again, pretty clear around drug trafficking, because we do know that there are people who are trafficking drugs, or people, the drugs are getting into our city somehow, and people are dying because of some of the drugs that are out there. So with that said, I will be supporting it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11H is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Helen Ross McNabb Center Incorporated to continue and expand the Knoxville Co-Response Team Program in an amount not to exceed $820,000 per year.
Motion to approve.
Move to approve has been made and seconded. We have several people signed up to speak in favor and also in opposition. First person signed up to speak in favor is Denzel Grant. Mr. Grant, are you present? You come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
My name is Denzel Grant, 37914, Knoxville, Tennessee. I want to, coming up here, I want to let it be known the support that I do have for Miss Candace Allen and her staff. We've been able to build a relationship through the Violence Reduction Committee over the last couple of years. But mainly my reasoning for getting up here tonight and addressing City Council, I stand before you to emphasize the critical importance of community-based and community-formed organizations addressing challenges that we face. Engaging and empowering our community is essential for fostering resilience and ensuring that our initiatives are both effective and sustainable. Turn Up Knox amplifies this approach, striving to interrupt cycles of gun violence in the Knoxville area by supporting and equipping and empowering individuals to create a safer and healthier community. Reflecting our journey, I'm reminded why we began this work in 2021. Knoxville faced a heartbreaking number of homicides, many involving our youth that year, and served as a call to action, compelling us to come together and create solutions. Today, as we review the data in 2024, we see a significant decline in homicides and non-fatal shootings. These are not just statistics, they represent the lives that we saved and the families spared from grief, neighborhoods beginning to heal. Notably, 2024 marked the first year since 2019 that black and brown men and women have died at a reduced rate, decreasing from 75% in 2019 to 39% in 2024. This is a significant achievement in a city where the black population comprises less than 20%. The importance of alternative response cannot be overstated. Organizations and ideas like HEART, organizations like Drums Up, Guns Down, Project TLC, and of course Turn Up Knox have played a major role in reduction of gun violence over the past 2 years. Turn Up Knox in particular has been instrumental in interrupting cycles of gun violence by supporting and helping community members. Our collaboration with the city, community partners, and organizations have been pivotal in these efforts. The progress we've made reinforces the power of collaboration and the effectiveness of comprehension and community-based approach to violence prevention. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the City Council for their unwavering support over the past 2 years. Your commitment to funding and advocating for the initiatives like ours have been instrumental in the progress that we've all been able to achieve together. I would like for my staff to take an opportunity and stand up. I want people in the community. I want people in the community to see the people that are making the everyday sacrifice. While we can't take all the credit, I would like to say that it's with no doubt that we've made a significant impact. However, City Council, I must bring to your attention a pressing concern. Despite the City Council approving funding for Turn Up Knox on October 15th, we have not received any payment for our services. The last payment we received was on May 29th, 2024.
Mr. Grant.
It was both the mayor and
Mr.
India
Grant,
Can.
is this
It was
not
both
germane?
Mayor India Cannon
This
and
is not
LaKenya Middlebrook
germane.
who advocated for us.
Mr. Grant, the rules say that you're speaking on item
It was
11.
It was both Mayor
H, and this is not germane to that item.
and LaKenya Middlebrook who advocated for us to receive funding in the third year without intensive reporting requirements. But no, both of you are questioning my leadership behind the scenes, all because I spoke.
Thank you. Mr. Grant, you're out of order. Mr. Grant, if you want to speak on a public item, you have to speak at public forum if it's not an agenda item.
This financial strain has forced me to go my own salary to ensure my staff is paid. Unfortunately, now we have reached a point where my dedicated
Mr.
staff
Grant,
Mr.
Grant, you're out of order.
I regret to announce that we have now suspended operations until this funding issue is resolved. Thank you for your time. I will continue my dedication. Thank you.
Okay, next person signed up to speak on this item is Rick Roach. Is Mr. Roach present? Okay, next person signed up to speak is Carrie Fair. Ms. Fair, is Ms. Fair present? Okay, if you could come up to the podium, turn on the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Carrie Fair of 125 North Concord, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919. I am a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in the Bearden area, and I'm here tonight to support the co-response team. I have, my experience with the co-response team has been nothing but positive. I, for example, had a client who stopped taking medications, became very manic, was driving fast, was talking erratically, was very agitated on the phone. It took me a while to get her to pull over. Eventually, when I did, I decided to call 911 and ask for the co-response team. The reason why I did that instead of mobile crisis, which is usually my first plan of action, was because of the level of agitation and the circumstances in which. So being on the side of the road, and also this client had a history of physical aggression, and so I felt like it was really important to have the police force there to keep that under control, to keep everyone safe, so the social worker could then be able to provide the services that were needed to get my client to where she needed to go. They approached her in such a kind and compassionate manner. They were respectful, all while being on the side of the road, which was a very dangerous situation in the first place. From my clinical point of view, the combination between the police force and a therapeutic staff is perfect. Not only do you have
Members of the audience, if you aren't quiet, you're going to be ruled out of order. Miss Every, you're out of order. If you don't stop talking, you'll be asked to leave. Okay, leave. You're out of order. Okay. You're interrupting the business of council. Just, we'll pause the clock here. Thank you. Just wait while the people disrupting the meeting are escorted out. Just-
I want to see the real you. Liar. Jim Crow.
Okay, Ms. Fair, we'll just give you.
You're fine. It's
less
not going
time,
to take
so-
that long.
Okay,
Basically,
thank you.
my point is having the police present makes it possible for therapists or to be able to de-escalate the situation, establish a connection, build trust with some clients that are in crisis and that otherwise may be a threat to themselves or somebody else. And from my experience, the client that I'm referring to, I'm not sure she would be with us today if that co-response team wasn't present to respond and go help. We needed immediacy. She was on the side of the road. She was endangering herself and a lot of other people. And that's been my experience with the co-response team. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Fair.
Thank you.
The third and final person signed up to speak in favor of this item is Webster Bailey. Mr. Bailey.
Good evening, Webster Bailey, Executive Director at Metro Drug Coalition. Address is 530 West 5th Avenue, Knoxville. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Council members, I'm here tonight to speak in support of Resolution 11H, which will extend and expand the KPD and McNabb co-responder program. I believe this program is a shining example of how our city can lead when it comes to addressing mental health crises with compassion, innovation, and efficiency. Since its inception, the co-responder program has fundamentally changed how we respond to individuals in crisis. Pairing KPD officers with behavioral health clinicians has allowed us to take a holistic approach to public safety, ensuring those experiencing mental health crises receive the care that they need, not the punitive measures that they fear. While there are other models for doing this kind of collaborative response work, the model that we have here in Knoxville seems to be working well, and with increased funding and expansion capacity, I believe the results will increase as well. Let me highlight a couple of the program's achievements that I'm aware of. In just over 3 years, the teams have answered over 4,000 calls. 860 of those calls were in 2024 alone. Almost half of those calls involved individuals who were potentially suicidal. These are not easy situations to encounter, but these teams handled them with skill and with care. In 97% of the cases, individuals were assessed and triaged on the spot, which means they were able to be connected to services at the CSU, BHUC, Empath, area hospitals, and other community-based treatment options. This immediate response often prevents further escalation and the strain that it puts on emergency departments in our city. Only 3% of calls resulted in arrests, so that's 26 people in a number of 860. So only 26 were arrested out of 860, and there were 0 uses of force. This demonstrates the program's ability to de-escalate even the most challenging situations peacefully. And the clinicians didn't stop at the crisis. They conducted over 1,500 follow-ups last year alone, ensuring people had continued to have access to resources that they need to move forward. So there are limitations with the current staffing. I think with just 4 teams, coverage is limited to 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. I believe that with additional funding gaps, can be shrunk and filled in. Expanding to 6 teams would provide greater consistency around the clock and each day of the week, and it would ensure that every call for help can be met with the care and attention that it deserves. This funding also addresses another critical need. retaining good behavioral health clinicians. So these professionals are often on the front lines of mental health care, and increasing their salaries would reflect their value and ensure that the continuity of this life-saving program. I also want to emphasize the financial prudence of this resolution because funding does not impact the city's budget until the 25-26 fiscal year, giving plenty of time to plan while addressing an urgent growing need. Council members, by voting to support this resolution, you are not just expanding a program, you are affirming Knoxville's commitment to innovation, compassion, and justice. You are sending a clear message to the people of this city that their mental health matters, and in their moments of greatest need, Knoxville will meet them with care, not handcuffs. Thank you for your leadership and your thoughtful consideration of this critical resolution. I hope to watch this city continue to build a safer, healthier, and more compassionate Knoxville. I do have a little bit of time left, and I can't speak to F. I had some thoughts on what we passed over on F, but the way I see F is that we should absolutely go after that money because it's just additional money at the state that we need in East Tennessee, and we have to have a coordinated effort. So no drug coalition alone can solve this problem. No treatment center alone can solve this problem. No police department can solve this problem. It takes a comprehensive, coordinated effort, and we need to go after every resource we can to begin to heal and help our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. That concludes, we have now people who are speaking in opposition to item 11H. We'll start with Ms. Elizabeth Rowland.
Elizabeth Rowland, Fountain City, 37918. I'm here again as a member of Knoxville Heart to speak against agenda item 11H. As participants in the Knox County Knoxville Alternative Response Task Force, Hart strongly urges the Knoxville City Council to pause additional expansion funding for the KPD Co-Responder Program while the task force does its work. Per the memorandum of agreement, the task force has been charged with, quote, researching and developing a comprehensive business and strategic plan, essential as our community considers the addition of new alternative response services within our community, end quote. City Council should give the task force the time to do the job it was asked. In cities across the country, such as Nashville, Dayton, Denver, Louisville, Evanston, and Rochester, alternative response programs have been shown to save taxpayer money, increase community trust, and preserve law enforcement expertise for policing needs. The KPD Co-Responder Program should only be one piece of a multi-pronged approach to community needs. A robust alternative response program is another important component. Providing additional funding to the Co-Responder Program through this resolution is premature, seeing as our locally funded Alternative Response Task Force only just kicked off its first meeting less than 2 weeks ago. Hart is also concerned with the high cost of this updated contract and the lack of clarity as to what the funds would go towards. So the current contract with Helen Ross McNabb for the Co-Responder Program is about $380,000. And the new resolution, 11H, calls for approval of an $820,000 contract, which would more than double the cost of the program. I understand that some of this increase is due to inflation, some is due to program expansion with the addition of 2 new clinicians, and some is due to increased clinician salaries. But the contract states that the number of co-response teams will nevertheless stay at 4. I saw a later email from Chief Noel to council members saying that the co-response teams will also increase to 6, but that is not what the contract in the agenda packet says. In 1.1a, third paragraph of the Basin Agreement section, it says, quote, the contractor shall provide no fewer than 6 behavioral health clinicians such that 4 CRTs may be deployed, end quote. So let's further break this down. The contract would increase the cost by 116%, but Helen Ross McNabb would only provide 50% more staff. According to the online U.S. inflation calculator, inflation between 2021 and 2024 was a total of 19.8%. So if you do the math, 116 minus 50% minus 19.8%, that equals 46.2% of the cost increase that is left to be explained by salary increases or some other unknown costs. If you divide that amount by 6 clinicians, which would be the ones receiving the salary increases, that would mean that clinicians would theoretically be receiving raises of nearly $34,000 per clinician on top of their initial salaries in the last contract. I don't imagine that is actually the salary boost that they're getting. And so what is the rest of the 46% increase in this contract going towards? We all know that the city has limited funds to spend on many, many priorities. In summary, Hart asks you to vote no on this resolution due to the lack of clarity surrounding the high contract cost increase, and in order to allow the Alternative Response Task Force time to do what you all have asked them to do. To vote yes on this resolution would inappropriately preempt the research and business plan development that the Alternative Response Task Force has been assigned to carry out, and it would commit the city's limited funds on the basis of incomplete information and even less community input. Thank you.
Next person signed up to speak on this item is Lindsay Jaramko. You have up to 5 minutes to address council. Please start by stating your name and address for the record.
Hi, Lindsay Uremko. I live at 1750 Hillwood Drive. Just want to say that I think it is germane to talk about Turn Up Knox or to talk about Hart during any of these discussions, since, you know, co-response and Hart and Turn Up Knox have all been sort of pitted against each other to try to address a mental health crisis here in Knoxville. The other point, and I love somebody talking about contracts, that's so awesome. The other point I wanted to make, just to piggyback on what Elizabeth said, is I'm hoping that the council can explore why this contract is 5 months late. We're being presented with a contract that starts in the middle of August of last year. That was maybe supposed to wrap up at August of this year and then extended out 1-year terms for 2 to 3 more, for a total of 3 years for 2 more terms. So, you know, I was thinking back, I was looking at this program, and it reminded me a lot of when I worked at United Way, because we had a program with the city of Knoxville, and truly it was just something that was kind of set up and kind of forgotten about, and nobody at United Way was really responsible for looking at it, and nobody at the city really took ownership over it, because it was United Way's program, and everybody kind of put some money towards it and made a program that was not really helpful for anybody who uses it. To be completely honest. And so while I was working there, I was tasked with looking at it and making recommendations for how that could be improved with the intention of renegotiating the contract. So we started that process about 7 months before the contract was due to end. And, you know, it's very similar to this co-responder model. No offense to McNabb, who all does great work on the programs that are their programs. But this is City of Knoxville's program, right? So according to the contract, we're supposed to be collecting data. We should understand more about our city based on the work that we're doing for this program. And the more I've listened and rewatched even the joint commission between City Council and County Commission, I'm not really seeing any data that tells us a lot about the city that we live in, the city that we care so much about. And so it's really hard to evaluate the effectiveness of this program, and incredibly hard to justify expanding a program that you can't really understand the value of, to be completely honest. So I'm curious, you know, thinking back to my time at United Way, if the council might be able to address something that a City of Knoxville employee told me when we got to the end of evaluating the contract at United Way, which is that, hey guys, if you don't hurry up and finalize this before the contract ends, the contract will expire and it'll have to go back through procurement. So I'm wondering if that was true, or if that was just a very motivational, tack to get us to hurry up and finalize something. I did look in the City of Knoxville procurement policies and procedures, and I did see some notes about how a contract may not be amended or extended if the termination date has passed. once the contract has expired, there's no legal document to either amend or extend, and the requirement must be rebid. And so since this contract expired 5 months ago, I'm hoping that you all can recognize that, our policies and procedures matter, and that we should rebid these services. And, you know, you'd love to see a big price tag on something you can rebid. I would love to see the request for proposals to include something that could also be alternative response and wouldn't necessarily require a police officer to respond to those incidences. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council members, just to provide a little context, as most of you were here in 2021, you all approved a pilot where we started the co-response for the first time ever in Knoxville. We started with just one team. It was quite successful, and the next budget cycle we proposed and you all supported expanding that to 4 teams. Since that time, the teams, as Mr. Bailey noted, that we have been, there are records and data on this. There's been responded to more than 4,000 calls. And of those calls, there's been no use of force by co-responder officers. There's been a very few number of arrests out of those 4,000, and also 1,500 follow-ups for people as they move through the system of drug treatment and other things. So I think I've had the chance to meet with some of the social workers who've been participating in this, and they remark on how hard the work is, but how meaningful it is. And so what this contract does is, first of all, recognize that this is harder work and more challenging in many ways than a typical social work job, because you're out in the field, you're not at a desk, you're not inside, you're dealing with very acute situations. So this enhances the pay for those social workers. And since we know that 4 teams work, we are adding 2 additional social workers so that there can be more coverage. Because sometimes with only 4 teams, there's just no way we can cover all of the needs. So this would just increase our ability to provide these services to people in need when there's some kind of mental health crisis and people call 911. This in no way precludes the work of the committee that's working on alternative response. That's important work. This council has had several lengthy discussions and workshops on that, and that work is complicated. And we're very grateful for all the many partners, including social work providers and the Knox County Health Department, which is the health department for the city of Knoxville, who are participating in that. As several people have mentioned, we all recognize that there's treatment and working on reducing the demand and the public health side of things, and that is what our health department and various partners do. And then there is a law enforcement component that is essential too. And to me, the co-response team has shown that it's effective. It helps people get access to behavioral health services they need. And I really hope that you'll support this. And I do want to also publicly thank McNabb. The contract did run out in August, and I can't see where the McNabb folks are. Oh, there you are. You're a very trusted partner. Obviously, we appreciate that you continued this work and that you were able to, make sure that the work continued even as we worked on updating the needs to reflect the labor market and the difficulty of the work. So. I hope you'll support this, and I'll go to Council Member Parker. I think you were first, and then Vice Mayor Smith.
Quick question. Is there a reason why this contract didn't come back before us before it expired?
Yeah, one of the reasons is we were having trouble staffing the social worker positions, and so we wanted to address that, and the answer was, in part, adding more enhanced pay for the people who are willing to do this work.
And so what one of the public forum speakers mentioned is, are we required for this contract to be rebid?
Mr. Evans?
Okay, there's nothing particularly peculiar about this. Sometimes a contract will run out, be held up, whatever, and you end up going like month to month. If it's a trusted partner and they'll provide the services, they'll invoice you and you pay them. So, you know, August, yeah, that's a little bit of a time lapse, but that's, you know, it's not the end of the world. And I've seen stuff like that before, particularly when it's in a specialty area like this.
Thank you.
That is such an insufficient answer. So it sounds like it does conflict with our policy. For many reasons, I can't support this contract. And part of it, I would support a postponement on this contract as well. And I think it makes sense for us to review this along with the grant and to discuss them both at the same time. But I expressed these concerns to Helen Ross McNabb. When we spoke, they shared a lot of information with me, but this should be, especially as we're going through a process as a city to incorporate a new service into our 911 services and consider an additional alternative response service, to not have this information available to the public so the public can see these reports that we've been given today by hand is just inadequate. It's making this the process that we don't need it to be. We need this to be a process that builds public trust into these new services, public understanding into these new services. And we haven't had the level of discussion around this since the pilot program started. When we started the pilot program in 2020, we authorized co-response to expand to 4 teams in 2021. That's almost 4 years ago. Depending on what month it was approved. And from talking with Helen Ross McNabb and from the mayor's own report, they have not fulfilled this contract as written, which is to maintain the behavioral health clinicians on staff for the co-response teams. We weren't able to even renew the contract last August because of those staffing issues. Those are conversations that we have to be having. That's part of the reason for the proposal for the alternative response team. And it doesn't make sense to not just renew the contract, but expand the contract when we've only been able to maintain, from what Helen Ross McNabb has reported to me, those four clinicians on staff since October. And they've been authorized since 2021. And you want to expand the program after they've been authorized since 2021, can't keep the staff, but because they've been able to maintain the needed staffing for the last 4 months of the last 4 years, we feel comfortable expanding the program and directing much needed, potentially local dollars, because the contract, if we don't get the grant, these are city dollars paying for this. Directing city dollars towards an expansion of a program that we've only seen be stable in our community since October of last year. The reason why we propose...
Ms. Parker, there's some other council members signed up who've have their microphones on, so we can come back to you when they're done. Vice Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Would somebody from Helen Ross McNabb please come up? So we had a workshop on this since its inception, maybe even 2. And you all came to our retreat, I remember 2 years ago, and presented data on this. And we have data upon request from you all. So there's no shortage of data in terms of the number of calls, what the issues are, how many have resulted in the use of force, which in the past year I believe is 0, half of these calls are suicidal ideation. So there's no shortage of data to council members upon request or just generally from McNabb. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
The staffing has been difficult during the pandemic, which, if everybody recalls, was a challenge for everyone. But there was lagging challenges for staffing in general. Whether you can get enough people to do the work is what we're trying to solve here by increasing the pay and increasing the attractiveness of the role, which I think there was a pay raise since inception that actually had an effect that allowed more service calls. Is this all right?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. So the model is, as everything that the data shows, this is working, and I think even some of the critics of this program have confirmed tonight that there's a role for this, and it is working. I hate to be a downer, but this is working, saving people's lives in our community. So anything else is just manipulation. There are critiques, and I think some of the people brought up some questions about the contract, and I'll ask some questions about that in a second. But explain the staffing and why this is needed and why the pay increase. And I think there was some questions earlier by one of the speakers around the math not adding up. It's my understanding that you're building not only paying people more, adding more people, but you're adding kind of a bench, if you will, to make sure that calls can be received around the clock.
Sure.
Can you explain some of the staffing story of this?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Smith. So since 2019, and then when we expanded the following year, we have continually maintained looking for staff. So at times, on and off, we have been at full staffing with the 4. We've not been able to maintain that due to turnover. For one of the reasons. The other reason is we're having a nationwide staffing shortage on healthcare providers. That is not unique to this community, it's across the country. In addition to that, this is a unique role. We want to make sure that the right person is in this position. It's not for every social worker who wants to work in this field. So we got to make that job fit perfectly. So we have continued to do that. And in October, we made the decision to go ahead and significantly increase the base. We had always done cost of living, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute when we talk about the increase in cost. But we made a decision back in October to significantly increase the base so that we could secure positions. And so that's what we committed to do. Do you want to talk a little bit about the increases in the funding and why?
Sure.
Okay, so I'd like to start by saying back in 2019 when we had the first co-responder team, it was $95,000. And then the following year, what I remember about that is the city coming to us and saying, we would like to expand that to 4. We're going to do 95 times 4, we get to the 380. In that moment, our cost probably on a budget was exceeding that 380 in that moment, but we knew in the cost-based relationship we have, we're only billing for the cost that we incur onto you all. So we knew we probably wouldn't exceed that max. Since that time, we have continued with cost of living increases since that 2021 time. We have as well as salary slow increases as people have stayed with longevity. And then all of our other expenses have increased as it has with every program that we have across the board. But we never came back to the city because we never exceeded the max capacity on that grant. When KPD came to us and said, what would it cost to budget for 6 FTEs, we did a couple of things. We increased the base from where we bumped it up to all 6. We added a little bit more supervisory time when you're covering 6 units. We wanted to make sure a little bit more supervisory time was built in to ensure that we.
Excuse me. Do not interrupt the meeting or you'll be asked to leave. But we have a practice, as I've said before, you're answering a council member's question. When you're done answering, we'll move on to the next council member. Please continue.
Okay.
And I hear any other interruptions from the audience, you'll be asked to leave. Thank you.
I'm not sure where I was. I think I was talking about in October, we made all the increases for all
You
6
said you were adding
staff.
some supervisory time.
Thank you, Mayor. So we added supervisory time to ensure that we could also provide coverage for any long-term vacancies if we had another one. And then, so that's the basis on the bump. Was there another
I
question?
have some more questions, but I'll come back.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Council Member Singh and then Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go off on a bit of a different tangent. One of the things that I've respected about HART a great deal is that nobody is getting paid. They're spending all of their time volunteering their time, their effort, their research. And so often there are groups who come together that are volunteers, community members, and then everyone else that they're meeting with has a full-time salary. And they're doing the equal amount of work. So my concern is also about what's going on with Turn Up Knox as far as us approving the contract and Denzel saying he hadn't gotten paid. If a person works, they should get paid, so I'm wondering what happened.
Thank you, Councilmember Singh. We really are hopeful that they will work with us as they have for the last few years, but they're not so far meeting the bare minimum requirements of reporting and meeting and just coordinating, which we do at the beginning of every contract year. So we're doing our best to work through that. It hasn't worked out just yet.
I understand that. There are bare minimums they need to meet, but if they haven't gotten paid till May, they don't really have much motivation to do that at this point. I heard Denzel say that they're suspending activities, and
Well, I'll just say that Mr. Grant said he suspended activities several months ago, and there's a lot of information that has been, we've been working on that to try to make it. We share a goal of reducing violence in our city, and there's been lots of discussion about the money. So I hope that you all will support this extension of the co-response contract, because that is one part of our way to deal with people experiencing mental health crisis.
so I respect the co-responder model. One of the things that I had heard was also that there's a faster response time with the co-responder model. Is that something that's true?
Faster than,
Regular
Yeah.
KPD.
I suppose
able
if
to
they're
move
available.
quicker.
I don't have any data on that.
But back to back pay. If they haven't been paid since May, what are we going to do about that?
Well, that's not factually accurate, what you just said. They've had several sources of income, including city dollars, since that time. So this is not the place to talk about a contract that's not on the agenda tonight.
To me, why I'm bringing it up is that these are all pieces of the same thing, public safety. And if we're making sure that McNabb gets paid, the police department gets paid, Hart doesn't, and it sounds like Turnup's not. So that's why I'm stringing these items together.
Well, first of all, to my knowledge, Hart is not an actual service provider.
No, but they
so
volunteer their time.
We do not know of any service provider willing to do that kind of response. So that's something the committee's, one of the things that they're going to evaluate and look into. We're not going to use today to negotiate or talk about the contract issues we're having with Turn Up Knox.
Why?
It's not on the agenda.
I'd like to hear from Denzel.
Councilmember Singh, that's not an appropriate use. It's not on the agenda. It's not part of the item that we're on. It's not germane to the
If
discussion of item
council
11H.
approves something and it's not happening, it is our concern. It was not part of the agenda, but as I said, to me, it's connected because this is all part of public safety.
Well, Ms. Singh, I hope that you know that, like you and other members of this council, I've been very committed to reducing violence in our city. We didn't even have a street violence interruption.
Right. We created this.
We created this. It's been a work in progress for several years. We've had a significant reduction in violent crime. Turn Up Knox is a contributing factor to that, as is the hard work of our police officers and, of course, the hard work of our community members. I'm not going to use, this is not on the agenda tonight. We're not going to discuss the contract details I think that's not fair to Turn Up Knox. and it's not on the agenda.
Mayor, this is a council meeting. I am a
Okay.
council member.
You can,
We don't have to go into this more tonight, but I would like to know what's happening and get an email about how we're going to fix this situation. It's okay if we're not going to contract with them and it's ending. It's just the work that they have already done.
thank you. Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to focus my attention to the item that's before us right here. But I do want to say, in support of what I was hearing from my colleague, Councilmember Singh, we do need more information about what's going on with Turn Up Knox. So I would like to request that we get a report on what's going on with that, in line with the questioning that we've heard tonight about it. But I do think it's really important that we focus on the co-response, because that's the item in front of us. Ms. Human-Hilliard, can I call you up? First, I want to kind of start off with the scope of the mental health, crisis that we find ourselves in. Not so much just our community, but this is throughout our country. But as I understand it, 1 in 5 people live with mental health condition. Is that pretty much true? Okay.
Turn the mic back on.
Oh, sorry. So 1 in 5 people
Correct.
live with a mental health condition, and that 50% of us will experience a diagnosable mental health condition during our lifetime.
That is true.
So when we're having these discussions about mental health, we're talking about probably your family members, your neighbors, your friends, a lot of folks. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the things that we have been doing, and specifically about judicial diversion, because I know that's come up a bunch. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the things that we're doing for judicial diversion, like the BHUC, for instance?
Sure. So, of course, the city and county have funded the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center out on Ball Camp, and it is uniquely designed for individuals who are presented to law enforcement with either a substance use disorder or mental illness that is under one of the 9 misdemeanor charges. And in lieu of jail, they are brought to the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center and can stay up to 23 hours there. They have immediate access to a nurse, a prescriber, so a nurse practitioner or psychiatrist, and discharge planners to really engage them in services post-discharge. We also have a community-based team that follow them into the community to make sure whatever needs they may have to get them engaged in treatment happens.
Okay. And the last time I remember us talking about this, there were over 2,000 individuals that were diverted from the judicial system because of that program. Is that still right?
Yes, since 2000, we started in 2018. I don't have the total number served to date, but I can get you those, but it's thousands.
Okay. And then we also have the empath, which just recently came online, and that's an ER diversion, which was focused on getting people in crisis to the right care and not being in the emergency room where they might not be getting the care they needed. Is that right?
That is correct. They don't have to be on arrest. They don't have to be brought by law enforcement, but we opened on June 3rd of this year, and we prioritized co-response for them to bring individuals straight there in lieu of hospital or jail.
Okay. And so now I want to turn to co-response, because we're kind of looking at the big issue and then coming down.
Mm-hmm.
So with the co-response, what you're trying to do is increase the number of teams, that you're increasing the pay because of what's going on there. But let's talk about some of the outcomes. So we heard that we got 97% that were served, were treated and triaged where they were, right?
Yes.
So how many numbers of people are we talking about?
Oh, well, let's see. Last year, we served, I'm not sure for that, 860 individuals. Of those, 336 had to be assisted to or transported to, facilitated to an emergency department for further evaluation on the road for an inpatient psychiatric stay. So we're talking about individuals who are in a very serious, acute mental health crisis. So that's roughly 40% of those. The other remaining 97%, 500, it would end up being treated and triaged in the community. That could be that they went to Empath, that they went to the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center or Crisis Stabilization Unit, or they were provided referral information for outpatient in the community, and then we're following back up to make sure that happened.
And I'm out of time, so I'll have to come back to you, but thank you.
Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to speak briefly. First and foremost, I do want to thank the people who are in this room and the people who aren't in this room that do this work every day, whether they're paid for it or they just do it because it's in their heart to do, that they want to see a safer and better community and city and residents in the city. When we look at these grant proposals, and especially looking at the Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council that has actually community grants, I wasn't aware they had community grants that were out there, and a lot of people are not aware of this information. When I look at, and I encourage everyone that's in that space to go out to their website, because the community grants they're giving to universities and colleges, they're giving to grassroots organizations. And this is missed opportunities for the people who are boots on the ground here in our city, additional people who don't know that. I mean, we have people in this room who I know go into their own pockets, such as Vivian Scheidt, doing the work, and other folks on an everyday basis. What I will say is that when we talk about alternative response versus co-responders, the work and the needs are great in our city and in our communities, and I do feel like there is room at the table for everyone. It's a matter of how do we get there and how do we make it work. I will say that I'm a little shocked to hear that the meeting, when we talked about from that presentation and that task force was being put together, that it took so long for a meeting to happen. And so I'm not sure what it would take to expedite those meetings and work. I know it's probably a lot of people there, but even at for the next meeting that's scheduled, if you just let council members know, for those of us who would be interested in sitting in on the meeting, just to hear the conversation and the level of process that's being made. But again, I think that what it's going to take is all of us working together and not against each other. No one in here is anyone's enemy. We all have the same agenda and mission, and that is to help people, to save people, to heal people, and to create a safer environment. When we talk about KPD, and I'll just be very honest, there are just some of us who just are not going to like law enforcement, no matter where we live, whether it's Knoxville, Tennessee, or whether it's Alaska or Canada. We are just not going to like law enforcement. But at the end of the day, law enforcement serves a key purpose as well, primarily public safety, crime prevention, and community engagement. When the co-responder model was brought up, it was brought up because to be part of, under that KPD umbrella, because there are situations that are not safe for people to go out into in communities when you don't know if a person is homicidal, suicidal ideations. Sometimes if a person is under the influence, that can change within a few seconds. And so, again, I just want to encourage us not to just take out our frustration and anger on people who are applying for grants or getting dollars for these to help with this prevention effort, because again, there's room we need everybody at the table, and I'm a firm believer in that. And so I don't want us to get to the point where we are pushing each other so far away that we lose sight of that common ground that we're trying to accomplish together. So I just wanted to say that, and I want to thank everybody who's here that's doing the work. And let's just all try to work together. Let's find that common ground so we can work together and not against each other, because that does not help the people that we know we have here in this city and in this community that need these services. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryder?
Yeah, Ms. Human-Hillard, I probably have questions for you. So first off, I'd like to say, rather than saying, hey, how's your program doing? Are you doing a good job? First, I'm going to say, I obviously know some people in the clinical fields. I've had neighbors that have worked in the psych area there at UT, and they spoke very highly of the co-responders. They knew the officers that work with your co-responders by name and speak. I don't know which ones they are because, you know, they're not necessarily talking about specific people by name with me, but there's like how good they do their job and how well it's done. And so when we talked, you talked about how things statistically broke out. So the number of people that were going to the hospital, the number of people that got follow-up care. So do you want to talk about that for a moment? And then just one other thing for clarity, since there was questions about the dollar amount. The dollar amount for the grant is covering the six clinical, master's level clinical workers with, that are working with the officers, and supervisory time or staff as well.
Correct.
Okay, so it's just not just 6 salaries, it's more things.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
I just wanted that to be clear.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So since I brought up the fact some folks do end up in the hospital, do you want to talk about those stats and some of the follow-up care? Because they don't just go to the hospital and get magically cured, and they don't just have a visit from a co-responder team and are magically cured. You guys talked about the volume of follow-up. So
Sure.
I'll let you have at that.
Thank you. I'll start off by saying, I'd like to remind everybody where we were 10 years ago, real briefly, when individuals in our community who were experiencing a mental health crisis in an acute stage were ending up going to jail, where they languished. And they may or may not have gotten treatment while they were in jail. It would be a very scary place and a very scary process, not where somebody who's struggling with a mental illness needs to be. And we thought there was a better way. And if people who were struggling with a mental illness, when they were presented with law enforcement, had a social worker there who could intervene and divert them to get them somewhere more appropriate, that was good for everybody. And at that point, KPD said, yeah, that's where what we ultimately we want for people. So that's what created that partnership. It wasn't something that came up overnight. It was a long time of us advocating for something to happen. So I'm very happy that we have so much interest in serving individuals who are in crisis with a mental illness. Whether we think about doing that different ways, a continuum of services is what we are always going to advocate. Not one person is like the next one person. For our outcomes last year, we did intervene and had 860 calls of lives in our community who were calling 911 because they or their loved one was in distress. We responded. Of those, 97% ended up where they needed to be and not in jail. Of those 97%, almost 40% ended up going into somewhere where they could be further evaluated to talk about the acuity of what we're talking about. The rest were served in McNabb's programs or other community programs where we felt like they could be better served. And then getting engaged and making sure they were engaged in follow-up care. That was very important too. So we're really proud of that. One of the reasons, we track a lot of data. We don't track diagnostic information. We track that through all of the other programs where they're served. So we're real proud of our outcomes. That is, over 800 people last year who didn't go to jail. And we're proud of that.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the work you guys do. I think that there's room in our community for co-responder, which we have going and happening. And I'm glad to hear that what HEART continues to work on is another option that can be layered on, because the need is incredible. And the idea that we can't expand one because we're working on something else, I can't agree with. I think we need both, and we need more, and we all know that. And we're short employees. When you talk about staff turnover, it's not about whether you guys couldn't or didn't. It's so many people can't fill things. We are short clinical needs in this community in every role. We have whole wings of the hospital at times that are just closed, not because we don't need people, on the wing and there aren't people waiting on a bed, it's because there's no staff for it. So
Councilmember Ryder, you're not concluding. Yeah. Thank you. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see if I can pull together. So, lots of thoughts. Probably don't have time for all of them, but one I want to follow back up on is a comment made that council members can go to McNabb for all the data is there, and all the data is available. We had a very lengthy call. I had a very lengthy call with McNabb, and I asked for a lot of data that you are not willing to give me. And you asked me to go instead to KPD for that data.
Sure. With all due respect, my response was, we are contracted through KPD. And as
exactly.
that subcontractor, we
Yep.
provide that information
Exactly.
to you. I provided that information verbally to you, but felt like that was most appropriate to come through who's contracting with us for that service.
I just wanted to clarify that McNabb is not our go-to, according to your understanding of the contract. KPD is our go-to for that information.
That's how it's set, that's how I felt like it was set up at that time, but we have provided county commission and city council members data from any program that we have when they've requested it, and we've provided that on quarterly basis, so we can continue, we can do that if that's what you all think is the most appropriate.
I would love quarterly reports. I have not received one report. So to start receiving quarterly reports, I think would be fabulous. Verbal reports I've received, but I like the written reports, because also we are getting questions, especially when the agenda item is so sparse. We're getting questions from the public about, what is this about? What does this mean? What is this? And if we don't have those details, we can't answer those questions. And then we don't have the nice, chill meeting that everybody would like, because people come in here with no answers to their questions, and we have very limited information in the packet. It's ridiculous. So what I wanted to ask is, in this contract, it says, contractor shall maintain and implement a data collection process to collect, track, and report on multiple measures, including numbers and frequency of calls. So we haven't talked about frequency of calls. And I have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I need a written report. We're not talking about the types of encounters and their dispositions, more details about what this looks like. We've talked a little bit about the services. I wanted to talk more about some of that overall analysis of the program. When we talked, you said that was not a part of the contract, was for you to provide that type of analysis. That's okay.
You asked me if we were under contract to provide that, and so I was being very specific that contractually, if you read it, we don't have that thing to do. I think our CEO said that she would be more than happy to provide that. I was being very legalistic in the question.
No, I appreciate that, because we were having that conversation because Helen Ross McNabb has a request for $820,000 for the city. And I understand that you did not have those answers at the time, but that's the time to have those answers. It's not upon me to make that meeting with you. It is upon Helen Ross McNabb to come ready with that information when you request $820,000. I have limited time. I will ask you a question if I need more information. Thank you. That's one thing. I would like to see this contract revised so that we can clarify those things. I'm not holding you accountable. I understand how you've clarified your understanding of the contract, but moving forward, we've had council members say, you're our point of contact. I would like that reflected in this contract. We've had discussions about how this is integrated in with our alternative response task force. I would like to clarify in this contract how we're going to pull data that will inform that process. It only makes sense that as we contract for co-response, it is we are pulling data that can inform other relevant processes that are going on at the same time. We're not saying one has to happen and not the other. We're saying this is happening independently from alternative response, and it should not be. Those two are too tied together for there to be this complete divide between them. This should be informing, since this started out as the pilot project, it should be informing that into alternative response task force work. And my time is up, just on that one issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas?
Yes, this will be a question for McNabb. I would like to go back into the field, kind of one-on-one as much as possible, or when you have those first encounters. This comes up with my constituents. I want to get a better idea because a lot of the issues are two, actually they're two, is one, the very real problem with people who are under psychological stress being confronted with a police officer, the first thing, which can often exacerbate the situation. That's without question. The other thing is the very real need for social workers to go into a situation that is possibly violent and could be dangerous to them. That also is very real. With the co-responder program, where you go out with a social worker and a police officer, could you describe how that encounter is made? Do you have like a set protocol that you have of approaching the person of concern? If you could tell me how the decision is made and when it's made about how to engage with this person in need.
Sure, thank you. I think one of the reasons why we selected or really advocated back 10 years ago to do the co-responder model was because it gives you options. So it gives the team, the law enforcement officer and the social worker, the ability to assess the situation from the time the call comes in until the time they get in front of the individual or situation on scene. And they can determine what is the best outcome to get that person where they need to be. That may at times need to be the law enforcement officer first approaching, or that may be the social worker needing to intervene first. The officer's gonna always make sure that it's safe for not only the individual, but for themselves and their partner and the community. So that's always gonna happen first, but who engages is really the call from the team together.
Okay, so there's a collaboration basically on site between the officer and the social worker about how this particular person should be engaged and who does it. Is that so?
That is correct.
So try to tailor it with each individual situation and each individual person of need. Is
Correct.
that okay? Thank you. I was just trying to get a picture of how that happened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. Want to ask, and I think maybe Deputy Chief Brace or someone else in the room can maybe give us the status on alternative response and where we are. I meant to do that earlier when I was speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So as others have spoken to tonight, so the actual task force, which I think is important to define, that's a blue ribbon committee of experts and advocates. HART is on that committee. They had their first meeting actually on the 7th of this month. And so, but it took a bit to lead up to that. So council held a workshop, made a request, the mayor's office, the team here at the city, then worked to find a facilitator. The United Way was willing to do it. We needed to secure funding. And so a letter was drafted where both mayors agreed that the United Way, and they agreed, would facilitate this blue ribbon group of citizens, and that was in February. We then needed to work on an actual scope of work, and I know there were some sections read out of that tonight. So the MOU was drafted. The funding was then turned over to the United Way to lead this process. So that took there wasn't an intentional delay, it just took time to do it right. So the concept of an alternative response service is an easy thing to get excited about. How that might actually work, What is the gap that needs to be filled with that new service? How would that be funded? Again, thinking about reimbursements from the state, thinking about local dollars, thinking about grants, what the service is, what the scope is, who might be an organization that would be have the capacity to do it and sustain it. So that is really the scope. How do you dig in and dot the i's, cross the t's, and make that plan come together? They've had their first meeting. I've talked with the interim executive director. They feel comfortable that they're on the right path to button this up over the next 6 months. And then the scope of work discusses a potential workshop, a joint workshop, to communicate those results. Again, it's complicated. It's easy to say we ought to dispatch another service, but how that happens in a way that's sustainable, how it's done in a way that can obviously fiscally be handled at the local level is going to require a lot of dialogue with the state. I'll give you an example. The empath unit that we opened up with Knox County, with McNabb and all the hospital systems, that was a 4-year project that required a lot of work at the state. And one of the biggest parts of that project was getting a commitment from the state for reimbursements for those patients. And that took visits to Nashville and the governor's office, and both for capital and ongoing reimbursements. So I think an alternative response is going to be on a similar path. And it's not in place of the co-response. Like, co-response is needed. And my guess is, we've all talked about it, there's a great desire and need for a new alternative response. But it's a lot harder to get the I's dotted and T's crossed to figure that out. So this committee's working on it. I feel confident that in about 5.5, 6 months, there's going to be a request for a workshop. And hopefully those results will then come out, and maybe a path forward can be agreed upon by this community, because there are competing needs.
Thank you. And is the county engaged in this effort as well?
Yeah, so the members of the task force, I'll just read out the organization. So there's a representative from Mayor Jacobs' office. There's a representative from Mayor Kincanon's office. There is a representative from KPD, from E911, from McNabb, Knoxville Heart, because they are volunteer. They asked if they could have 3 people rotate depending on their schedule. And so they have 3 individuals that are rotating based on their schedule. The Knox County Health Department, MTAS, and then the Knox County Community Action Committee. So that is the group of individuals, that blue ribbon task force. It doesn't mean that task force can't go grab another expert. You know, let's say a subject comes up and they want to have said subject come in and meet and bring their perspective. But this is the task force. The whole point of this was to depoliticize and let this group of experts come together and advocates come together, get the politics out of it, and really drive forward with what the gap is and how it may be effectively delivered in a sustainable way. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker.
And to clarify, this program, the co-response teams, are funded by city dollars. The county does not contribute. We look for grant funding, but there's no other, are there state dollars?
Correct. It's locally funded through city dollars.
So that's part of my frustration, is that we're willing to fund co-response with local dollars, but for some reason with alternative response, we cannot move forward unless we find other funding streams. That's unfortunate, because the public continues to lift up alternative response as a priority, and the data continues to argue that even our SIM process, as I've discussed with the Helen Ross McNabb, the more we are able to remove individuals experiencing any sort of mental health crisis from any interaction with the criminal justice system, the better off they are, the better off our communities are, the healthier, essentially, our communities are. And the only reason I see for moving forward with co-response is initially KPD could house it, and for some reason, our clinicians in our community felt unsafe without KPD support. I I think that that is something to revisit. That is not what I'm hearing from clinicians these days. Maybe it's because it was a new idea, I'm not sure. But even if we look at the call data, a small number of those calls seemed to need KPD response. And in order for us to be able to incorporate alternative response into our system, we've got to know what calls can be diverted to alternative response. If we look at all of the calls that are being fielded by the co-response team as needing co-response, we won't be able to move forward in our conversation as a city about how to make space for alternative response, or even acknowledge why we have come to an agreement as a council that alternative response is even needed. We're not having those conversations, and it's quite frustrating. Meanwhile, we're expanding co-response. I continue to believe that we will have better success with recruiting and maintaining clinicians and healthcare workers who can provide an alternative response. Then we're able to maintain through the co-response team. This is what I'm hearing from social workers throughout the city, throughout the country, that they do not want to work for a police department. So it's going to be a really, really small population of clinicians who would even be open to working within a police department because it conflicts with everything that they've been trained up until this point. So I'm anxious for us to get a service in place that will actually put the patient first, put the person first, not what KPD needs, not what's going to most be the quickest thing that we can get out there, but what's going to be the best thing that we can get out there that's going to be best for those patients who need that help. Not necessarily, we can't just follow what KPD wants and what the clinicians want. What do the patients want? What does the community need? That's what should be informing our steps moving forward. And if we don't have those answers yet, then let's renew a contract. We don't have to expand a contract. We can renew a contract. The contract only goes through August because they've already been doing this work without authorization through a contract. So we could extend I guess we can't extend the contract because that goes against our policy, but it makes more sense to me that we would maintain the current contract through this August and then reevaluate once the task force has had a few more months to work, once we get more data coming from the task force to understand what calls are going in, to understand whether, we do have someone we can look to in the community to immediately serve as an alternative response task force, and it's going to be cheaper than co-response. These are the conversations that we should be having right now, not expanding this team.
Vice Mayor Smith, and then Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a reference to the contract and its expiration. Deputy Chief Brace, can you address this, the expiration of the contract and what can happen or what can't happen after that?
Yeah, you had briefly mentioned this previously. I think Mr. Evans also talked about it. There are times that we have critical services where we have negotiating going on at the end of a contract, and we'll go month to month, and that's exactly what we did in this situation. We had a critical service. There was discussions about how to provide that service in the negotiations. We went month to month. Typically doesn't go as long as this one did, but that does happen. And so I think I'd talked to you about that previously. It's not ideal, but it does happen. And this is not a service. If you look at the data and you look at the avoidance of harm to the individuals we're caring for, and I would say that KPD and others have patient care as number one for what they do every single day. We didn't want to stop that while we were negotiating.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Human-Hilliard, will you come back? Helen Ross McNabb is part of the Alternative Response Task Force, is that correct?
I'm on the task force.
Thank you. And you all will either have or will provide co-response data as an input to that task force?
Absolutely. It's my understanding they're scheduling individual meetings
Okay.
to do that.
But that data or the resources of the task force will be shared cross-functionally with the members of the task force, Deputy Chief Brace, is that correct? Or whomever's leading that? from the
Yeah,
administration?
my understanding is the task force will receive all of the data as collected.
Thank you.
And they will work through the ultimate product collectively on, again, what is the service? You know, this idea of alternative response service, like, you have to define that scope. It's easy to go rah-rah about a service, but until you define it, and that's what this team is gonna do.
Yeah.
What is it? What's the gap?
Yeah.
How would it work? Who might do it?
Yeah.
So,
We're not ready for that, and the task force hasn't done its work. It's been too slow, I think, admittedly by all, so it's time to pick up the speed with that. But we don't have that answer yet, and so until then, this program is working, just like Turn Up Knox is working to do for prevention work. MDC does work that's valuable. There's 4,000 calls over the life of this that has plenty of evidence, we're not guessing here as to whether this works or not. So it does work. Can there be another role for this? That's what the task force is for. Is there anything about this, Mayor, I think you mentioned earlier, is there anything about this work or this contract extension that prevents the alternative response or a new concept to add to this?
No.
Okay. So there's nothing, no barrier to that task force, its work, its recommendations, funding for said recommendations. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you. I just have a question. I don't know to whom it should be addressed. It might be you, Deputy Mayor, or Mr. Brace, Chief of Staff, whatever your title is now. David, yes. So if I recall, when we had many of our workshops about this, one of the big discussions around different types of services would be updating the E911 center and how you would do calls. And so I think that is a barrier and something that's going to have to take place, how E911 can triage the phone call that comes in to know what kind of call it is to send. So I do think that's going to take some time. What I will say is I am fully capable of holding two thoughts in my head at the same time and believe that co-responder is working and something we should continue and increase because the need is there. In the absence of something that can hit the ground running today with all the bugs worked out, this is what we have. We know it's working, and I will support its expansion. Again, I can hold two thoughts in my head at the same time. I still think we need to be doing exactly what we're doing. I hate that it has not gone faster, but we need to put a little pedal to the metal and move this on through because, as everyone has said, the need is great. Two things can be true and not mutually exclusive. So I will support the addition because the need is great. Thank you.
Councilmember Parker and then Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my colleague. I can also hold two things in my head at one time. And in this situation, I see a role for a co-response, but I see a process, a contract, a report that's been presented before me that's inadequate, and I'm not able to, if the public were to ask me about the funding of this program, I can't say that that there's no wasted dollar here. I don't have that assurance based on the reporting that's been done. And in fact, even when we heard from Helen Ross McNabb about having expenses that went beyond the contract, but not following up with the city because you already had access to funding for 4 clinicians, even when you weren't maintaining those clinicians. So, and I'm assuming that's a reimbursement, so you're not being given that money just to do with whatever you want, but we are budgeting adequately for services that aren't being necessarily spent down because we're not able to fill those positions. And so to not acknowledge those difficulties as we're considering this contract, is not doing our due diligence, in my opinion. I don't expect Helen Ross McNabb to show back up in a couple of months like Turn Up Knox has today, but we are essentially in a similar situation where we have a program that I feel the reporting is lacking. Same arguments I was making for Turn Up Knox. Similar work where we've got to do something new and innovative in the community, but we've also got to be accountable for the taxpayers' dollars. And we're not expecting an adequate level of reporting to give us those assurances. We're not expecting, I am a supporter of public hearings, holding public hearings for issues like this, large investments of public tax dollars, new public services that are going to have an impact on the community. I want to hear from the community. I want to have those public hearings. I want to not just have, one anecdotal report shared during public forum, but really a comprehensive review of this new program that we're being asked to dedicate $820,000 city tax dollars towards. I don't feel like that's unreasonable. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do co-response. I'm saying, can we get some adequate reports that are public facing and a public conversation about a new program before we expand it? One question I had that I wanted to clarify is in this report, it does say, or in this contract, it says that Helen Ross McNabb shall provide the 6 clinicians for 4 CRT teams. So why does this contract, let me ask you, Chief, why does this contract state that there will only be 4 CRT teams?
I'm not sure why the contract is written like that. It is our intention to put 6 CRT teams on the street. That there will be times when we do not have all 6 working. They'll be in training, they have some sick, they have some on vacation. So if we have 6 employees, that will not always be working. But it's our intention, if this is approved, to put 6 teams on the street once they're hired and trained.
Can anyone speak to why the contract is written the way it is? Why the contract only obligates 4 CRT teams and not the 6?
I would assume that would be because people on vacation, people are sick, people are in training. That's what I would assume, but I didn't.
It is our intention, and the contract says this would fund 6 teams, 6 social workers, and we'll have as many as we can in the field at any one time. It's right here, we're saying that that's what we're going to do if it passes.
Okay, well, the contract only obligates them to 6 behavioral health clinicians for 4 teams. That's a 7 days per week, multiple shift
Thank you.
schedule.
I'm moving to the next council member.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, just kind of a basic question. As many have expressed, I'm surprised and actually somewhat disappointed that the task force is not further along than it is, because I'd really like to be hearing from them and kind of know, is there any particular reason why it's taken so long to get this going? It may be more complicated than I am. I'm just curious. I haven't.
Mr. Thomas, I would say it is complicated, and I also, United Way's been undergoing some transitions as well, and I think those 2 complex things caused it to take longer than we wished. But I agree that we wanted to move with all due haste to, do the analysis, do the work, help define what this could be for our community and how it might be a sustainable path forward and who would provide the service. I mean, those are a lot of big questions, how it would be deployed and if there's an entity in our community, not just willing, but capable of providing the service. But yes, it's taken longer than any of us hoped. Those are the 2 reasons, is my understanding.
Okay, that's good to know. I realize there must have been some obstacles there because I was expecting it to be further along than it is, but I wasn't trying to say that there wasn't justifiable reasons for it taking so long either. So thanks for the clarification.
Seeing no lights on, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-1. All right, we'll move to public forum. We have 3 people signed up to speak. First is Lindsay Harenko. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name.
Lindsay Uremko, I live at 1750 Hillwood Drive. So if it did go month to month, I know we're over it, we're moving on. But if it did go month to month, you would expect that to come before council too, right? Because that's $32,000 a month, and this is over $15,000 is supposed to be contracts coming before you all. The only thing I really wanted to mention, first of all, Tommy Smith, you mentioned at the last meeting that there was a masterful misinformation campaign. I was really hoping tonight to hear you say that now that you understand a lot of the information that I believe you're referring to with Councilmember Parker, City Council Movement, Community Defense of East Tennessee, all of that information came from the agenda packet. I was hoping that you might correct the record tonight, and I know it's public forum, so I was disappointed I didn't get a chance to hear that. I was also hoping that conversations have happened in between the last 2 weeks to encourage the city to please consider that people are reading these agenda packets, and we are really seeking to understand what's happening in our city, and it's important that we're able to trace how the money's spent. I know that it gets very complicated, but me with a master's degree and experience and varied professional experience, if I can't follow along with what's happening, you either don't know what the rules are or you're not playing by them. That's not directed at you, Tommy Smith, just in general. So what we're asking is for transparency. This really is our government. You all are working for us, and we elected you for better or for worse, and we're really going to hold you to the promises and for the roles and responsibilities that you all hold. I do thank you for considering a lot of this. It is disappointing to hear you all just completely disregard your own procurement procedures. A lot of these are not just based on sort of like best practices or ideas. They're based on state law a lot of time, and it's also these aren't our friends. You're friends with McNabb. I have a lot of respect for McNabb and the work that they do, but I'm not friends with McNabb, and I don't know them, and I don't know that they're not spending this money on other very worthwhile endeavors that benefit us as a whole. But that's not what each of these resolutions are for. The money is supposed to be spent on what it's supposed to be spent on. And so if there's some sort of confusion for the general public about how our money is being spent, consider that it's not just people coming up here and attempting to be annoying for you all. We believe that we have information that we have to offer you. I hate public speaking, and I'm here sharing this information because I think it's a benefit to you. I also wanted to comment on just the general normalizing of not allowing additional speakers. I know that it can feel obnoxious. If it wasn't happening here, God forbid it happens to you at your brunch. Like these things are going to come to you regardless. The information will travel. And so, when you decide that we're gonna go equal numbers for each side, I think it's short-sighted, and I think it really betrays two contradictory beliefs you have to hold at the same time. I think one of those is that you couldn't possibly learn anything from the community, or else I don't think that you would turn down the opportunity to hear people share that information. And that council will be too overwhelmed by the public coming and sharing their concerns about any given issue. And that council will not be able to weigh that information. And I've seen council weigh that information tonight, and so we know that that's not true. So moving forward, it'd be great to see more information in the agenda packet and some understanding that we are looking at it. And, you know, about the resolution last week, I mean, city did drop like 40-plus pages of what essentially amounted to a surveillance and weapons catalog right in the middle of the agenda packet with absolutely no context whatsoever. So, you know, that can be cause for concern for us. And as far as also having that contract since last fall and sitting on it and not sharing it with the public and giving us, you know, 4 days to look at it. Tommy Smith, you texted me a week ago to ask if I found any more of the approvals I was worried about, that I was going to come to council and share concerns about that $27.5 million contract. I haven't found all the approvals. I haven't found the approvals for the tasers. And it might have just sort of been bundled
Thank
up in
you,
one of
Ms.
those other
Uremko.
contracts.
Your time is up. Next person is Vivian Shipe. Ms. Shipe. You'll have up to 5 minutes to address council. If you could start by stating your name and address for the record.
Vivian Shipe, 503 Longview Road, Knoxville, 37919. The time is always right to do what's right. These are the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. They ring just as true today as they did when he first uttered them so many years ago. Sometimes when a policy has time to be in effect, the results will show the strategy must change in order to complete the goal for which it was made. Bad policy will reveal the unintended consequences, sort of like the medication commercials we see that end with the words, side effects may include. The 25-degree policy of keeping the doors closed of the warming centers and the lack of financial backing to help those willing to operate them has created these types of side effects. Created a strain on volunteers willing to work at the different centers, a lack of resources and supplies. And now, as the commercials say, death may occur. And now, death has occurred. As last week, a 75-year-old man died in his wheelchair, all alone, under a canopy, in a park, frozen to death. Bad policy must be changed. It's the right thing to do. Bad rules that hurt people must be changed. Innovative ideas must be tried. One such window of opportunity for this council happens tomorrow. You're holding a hiring fair. Tomorrow you will be interviewing, doing background checks, and hiring on the spot. What a difference it would make if our new housing Office of Housing Stability would have a booth there to hire CHWs, community health workers whose job is to staff these warming centers, and in the off seasons, work in the communities to educate, provide resources, and help the homeless to be restored. They would be city workers with good paying jobs, with benefits. CHWs have been used in other states for years, and in Tennessee, we're just beginning. Do some research and check it out. There are many cities like Nashville who have taken the bull by the horns and are intentionally working to reduce the problems of the unhoused. It is time for Knoxville to do the same. It is time to do what is right.
Okay, council members, that concludes public forum. Without objection, this meeting is adjourned.